Massively multiplayer online games, aka MMOs, have been a very enjoyable and successful game genre for decades. When the genre comes to mind, you probably think of the heavy hitters like World of Warcraft, Old School RuneScape, Final Fantasy XIV Online, Guild Wars 2, The Elder Scrolls Online, etc. And you have your smaller ones like Ragnarok Online, Albion Online, Adventure Quest, EverQuest, etc. But for me, the first game that comes to mind when I think of this genre is a game you've probably never heard of: Realm of the Mad God. This is one hell of an MMO. Back in ye olden days when I couldn't afford anything because I was a kid with no job and my parents never trusted online purchases, this game came in clutch from seemingly out of nowhere. A free-to-play MMO full of action, a varied amount of enemies, bosses, loot, and a lot of unique characteristics that wasn't found in any other free MMOs I'd played at the time. The big ones being that it has a top-down like view, is a shooter/bullet hell style looter game, has nice pixel art graphics, and is a roguelike. This was done for a pretty interesting reason. The game's original creators, Alex Carobus and Rob Shillingsburg, stated that the aim of the game was to shake things up by breaking as many MMO rules as we could. It was made at the indie game forum TIG Source's assembly competition. It got good feedback and was eventually developed and launched in a beta state in 2010 before being properly launched in 2011 as a browser-based game that ran off of Flash. And then from there, the game received updates adding in new dungeons, character classes, gear, enemies, etc., and was remade in Unity to prepare for Flash's shutdown in 2021, while also shifting developers from Alex and Rob's studio Wild Shadow back in 2010, everything in between, to Deca Games in the present. So there's a lot of history and content surrounding this game, and I've followed it ever since its 2011 release, playing the game on and off. And there's a good reason for that, because overall I think it's a fun, addictive, and unique game thanks to its gameplay, looting, and leveling system, but these factors can also be a pretty big detriment to the game too, which is why I'm, on and off with the game. Despite this, it's one of, if not my favorite MMO game, with other people having similar views to me. So to understand all of this, the good and the bad, you need to know what makes up this imperfect gem of a game: Realm of the Mad God. Let's start off with some of the story. Who is the Mad God? The Mad God, better known as Oryx the Mad God, is the main antagonist for Realm of the Mad God, which I'll be abbreviating to RotMG for convenience's sake. Oryx was once a champion from the Shattered Kingdom, and he was known as a mighty warrior throughout the realms. He accumulated so much fame and power that it started to go to his head, making him boastful. Coupled with his alcoholic tendencies and he began acting irrationally out of fear of losing his status. He allied with the very evil he once slayed, and together, they created a wicked incantation that would change everything forever, ensuring that Oryx's sovereignty remained untouched. Normally, due to powers beyond the understanding of even the gods, those who fight for just and righteous causes are able to return from the dead after falling in battle. Oryx flipped this on its head, granting his forces and those who wish to kill you, regardless of alliances, this ability to resurrect. Meanwhile, us, the players who fight for righteousness, experience permadeath. That's a pretty cool way to explain why we have certain game mechanics and why everything is the way it is, which also fits well into the gameplay loop. Just like any roguelike, the game has a set path or objective carved out for players that can be approached and reached in different ways. This involves readying up in the Nexus, entering a realm, killing all of Oryx's varied minions to provoke him, looting up, defeating him and his optional incarnations if you want to, and doing it over and over again. This is the game's bread and butter, but as much as your objective is to kill Oryx, there's so much variety with how you can go about it, and I think it's the game's biggest strength. You want to ignore dungeons and just complete an objective in a realm? Go for it. You don't care about killing Oryx and want to loot dungeons to upgrade your character's stats and give it better gear? Do it. Want to travel from realm to realm hunting for a specific dungeon for a specific piece of loot? What are you waiting for? The only thing stopping you is if the activity you want to do has already been completed in the realm you're in. But you can jump to other realms or servers to find what you want to do. So for the most part, you have so much freedom in what you want to do because there's just so much you can do and other people will complete the objectives you don't. So the loop progresses naturally, but what happens when something goes wrong? When you die. Your character will leave behind a gravestone with its size depending on if you've hit max level and how many stats you've maxed out. You'll also lose everything in your gear slots and inventory. And you will die over and over and over again and lose characters you may have grown fond of. I know I sure have. My knife! So then from here, you can start again with the regular starting gear or any gear you stored away in your vault so you can get back into the fray faster. Additionally, you'll be awarded fame with the amount being determined by your level and accolades on death. With this fame, you can buy lots of permanent and not so permanent upgrades and loot. Speaking of loot, lucky for players, there's a lot of loot to find across the 18 playable classes. That's right, there are a total of 18 classes to choose from which can be unlocked by playing and dying as other classes after hitting max level, level 20, and they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Some of these classes share the same weapon or armor type, but for the most part, they're all different enough due to their unique class ability and stat pool. See, each class has a hit point, mana point, attack, defense, speed, dexterity, vitality, and wisdom stat. Hit points determine how much damage you can take, mana points let you use your class ability, attack affects how much damage you do, defense affects how much damage you take, speed determines your movement speed, dexterity affects how fast you attack, vitality affects how fast you passively recover hit points, and wisdom affects how fast you passively recover mana points. These level up differently depending on what class you're playing, with some RNG affecting it, can be maxed differently depending on what class you're playing, and gear can affect your DPS and stats too. Originally, each class could use one out of the 6 available weapon types, but as of an update from August 2022, 6 new weapon types were added to the game, and now each class can use 2 out of the game's 12 weapon types. Just like each class, they too have advantages, disadvantages, and these weapons determine the bullets that you shoot. After all, you have to fight bullet hell with a bullet hell. Each class also has a unique ability item that uses mana. Abilities can do damage, support you and others around you, be used for utility, or a bit from each column. For example, wizards and sorcerers have damage abilities, priests and paladins have support abilities, mystics and rogues have utility abilities, etc. Naturally, support style abilities apply positive effects that buff or heal allies, and negatively affect enemies. For example, paladins and warriors can give strength and dexterity buffs to themselves and allies respectively, and the knight can apply stun to enemies which stops them from attacking for a few seconds. Enemies can also apply positive status effects to themselves and negative ones to players. Now each class can also equip either robes, leather armor, or heavy armor, and any of the game's rings. All of the loot is tiered, with the higher tier loot being better in the damage, defense, and utility department. Weapons are tiered up to tier 14, ability items are tiered up to 7, armor is tiered up to 15, and rings are tiered up to 6. But not only are there numbered tiers, there are untiered and set tiered gear, also known as UT and ST. UT equipment are usually reskinned gear with unique bullet patterns and stats that break away from numbered tier weapons. Like for example, this lovely Cloak of the Planewalker. It gives rogues the invisibility that comes with using a cloak and some stat ups, but a rogue wearing this can also teleport to a surface the mouse pointer is on, which no other cloaks can do. Very cool and unique. ST equipment on the other hand make up gear sets, with 4 pieces needed to make a whole set. Once a set is complete, your character will have its model changed to something that represents the set. For example, the Horrific Sorcerer set, which I've been trying to obtain. Oh man, you'll get to see that as I try to make a point later on in the video. It gives sorcerers a massive boost in their defense and speed stats, and some good HP, attack, and wisdom stats at the cost of attack speed and no piercing hits, turning the sorcerer into a bit of a tank. So all of the gear available for you to loot and equip can affect so much of your stats and even playstyle depending on what you equip, creating its own set of challenges. The amount of gear in the game, your character's power growth, and how it can change your playstyle is another one of the game's biggest strengths, and there's a lot of gear to find and use. As you'll have seen throughout the video, all of this gear drops as loot from enemies in the form of a bag. They're tiered from worst to best, starting off at brown, then to pink, purple, egg, cyan, blue, golden, orange, red, and the beautiful and illustrious white bag that every player seeks. Brown and pink bags are known as public bags, meaning everyone can see them when they're dropped by enemies, or when players drop items on the ground that aren't soulbound. If an item is soulbound, it means that it can only be seen and interacted with by the person it dropped for. Bags can also be soulbound, meaning that only you can see them, and these bags are the purple ones all the way up to the white ones. They can also become boosted by using a loot booster, changing its appearance to a thicker than a bowl of oatmeal bag. Getting the higher tiered bags is a euphoric experience you can only get in RotMG. It's an unreal feeling and is such a massive hit of dopamine, especially the first few times you get a white bag. The color scheme for the bag is perfect too. It's a lovely white with a blue ribbon around it that's just so inviting. The white bag is considered to be the best drop in the game because of the incredible loot that it'll always give you. So much so that you can find hundreds of loot bag montages on YouTube giving you that white bag fix without having to go to the trouble of finding the bag. You can also find a lot of comedic montages, with some of them being so old that they have rage comic images throughout them. So shoutouts to this game's small but tight community. I've had an overall positive experience over my many years of playtime, and shoutouts to Furious Chad for giving me his loot for free. That was nice. But how do you get to the point that you're getting white bag drops from bosses? How do you start off with rags and get to riches? How do you create a legend? I've already explained what the gameplay loop is, but let's really get into the details. When first starting the game, you'll begin as a default wizard character and load into the tutorial level where you can learn the basics of the game like shooting, using abilities, and dodging enemy bullets. The enemies are made up of chickens, butchers, and guards, so you won't have too much trouble here. After killing chickens, butchers, the tutorial bosses, and finishing the tutorial, you'll find a portal to the Nexus, the game's safe zone and hub world you can retreat to at the click of a button or hotkey. Well, it's a safe zone most of the time, but anyway, let's look at the Nexus. Basically, this is the place you'll visit before you begin your adventures, in between, and after. It's broken up into sections and there's a lot to do here, like taking and leaving items in your vault, interacting with the guild hall, checking in on and upgrading your pets in the pet yard, collecting daily login bonuses and quests, and these are all accessible via portals in the Nexus. You can also heal up at the fountain after a big battle. Remember kids, hit your Nexus hotkey button whenever you're in hot water because it could be the difference between surviving or losing your beloved character. You can also find and do other miscellaneous and malicious things in the Nexus, but I've highlighted the more not so self-explanatory things, and I'll continue on with them. Your vault is, like I've already said, a place where you can store gear for future use. By default, it's very limited unless you spend real-life money, which I'll talk about later because this game is absolutely littered with microtransactions. There's also a blacksmith here that allows you to craft gear with various materials made up of differing rarities obtainable from dismantling gear and items. Now the guild hall is a place where people part of the same guild can chill out together, organize members, and spruce up the place using fame and by changing up the guild board, which my one has definitely seen better days. And I'm just gonna blur that word out because that is not a very YouTube friendly word. I've got two accounts on this game, my Steam account Cheek Pound and my Legacy account Savage Frag. I have so many fond guild related memories on my Legacy account. I set up semi-successful guilds, made friends, ranked the real ones up high to give them more guild permissions, and went on adventures with guild buddies. Honestly, the guild system has been great since day one. Nothing much has really changed here over the years, other than the inclusion of a friendly NPC called Gil that responds to a wide variety of commands that you can type in chat which have different uses. The pet yard is a place where you can level up pets and fuse them together if they're of the same family category and rarity. They hatch from eggs you can find and vary in family category and the skills they have. Plus, you can take them on your adventures, and you don't lose them when you die. Pets get up to 3 skills, and I'll just say it, you'll definitely want a pet with the skills Heal and Magic Heal. Those skills are just too good. Your pet will just periodically recover your HP and mana for free. Electric, which can paralyze enemies, is pretty good too. And I'd also recommend maxing out your pet's stats before fusing them, so then you can get the highest stats on the fusion. Now we're off to the daily login and quest area. This place reeks of ass. Daily logins, okay, they can net you some pretty good rewards, but the system trains you into logging into the game so you don't miss out on the free rewards regardless of if you're enjoying the game or not. But this game's system takes it up a notch. The rewards are monthly, meaning that the calendar resets each month, so if you miss a few logins in the month, you can kiss certain rewards goodbye. Now the quests here suck too. They're unimaginative and tedious. For the most part, they're all just collect tokens off of bosses and hand them in. Great. And the rewards just have too much RNG involved in them. This whole area and what it offers needs a massive overhaul. You know what? For the most part, the whole damn Nexus needs an overhaul. A big change. It's just so empty, full of microtransactions and bot spam. Adding some NPCs and quest lines with permanent upgrades would be nice. Anything would be nice, just do something with the game's hub world. But enough of that, let's move on to the social features. Just like in other MMOs, you can private message people, talk in guild chat, talk in a more general chat for the area you're in, and trade with players. You're in the Nexus, you can use the all chat to talk to people in the Nexus. The same thing applies in Realm overworlds, dungeons, portals, etc. But for private messaging, as long as someone's online, you can private message them, also known as whispering, no matter where you both are or even what server you're on. Maybe send me a message and we can play together. I'm so sorry! You'll also notice bots using these features as well to talk in the Nexus or whisper to you about the website they're promoting. They can get pretty annoying, but you can mute them, so that's nice, I suppose. The guild chat is pretty self-explanatory. It's a chat that you and your guild can see and talk in. Now this game also has a friends list where you can view friends and join the server that they're in or chat with them. This is all good and standard for the MMO genre, but there's one other feature that's a bit more unique to this game, the lock function. In the bottom right of the game's UI, you can see up to 6 players that are in close proximity to you. Right-clicking their name gives you the option to lock them, among other things. Having someone locked means that as long as you're in the same area as them, they'll always appear in the bottom right, which makes interacting with that person so much easier. Obviously, the friends list being added a few years back has streamlined the social features of the game, but for years, this was all we had. You'll notice that for the majority of my recordings, I have my friend Chris playing with me, and yes, the lock and friends function work great for playing with friends. Oh, but don't you even freaking dare try playing with people over the same IP address because the game doesn't like that. When I used to try and play with my brothers, one of us always had connection issues, and it's not just me, it's an issue that other people encounter and it baffles me still to this very day. It makes no sense, and don't you try changing your IP address to get around this problem either, because then you'll get a 24-hour ban. It just adds to this game's empty feel when you aren't playing with someone or a group of friends, which is then further personified because of how low the player count is. I talked about this in my Liminal Spaces Iceberg video, but man, does this game feel empty sometimes. The player count is so dead for many reasons, some of which I'll get into later, but anyway, I want to quickly touch on player trading. Trading is fairly simple. Someone requests a trade, the other person accepts, items are bartered, trade is accepted or declined. Simple. Obviously, a player can decline a trade invite, and some items can't be traded if they're soulbound. The game also has a teleport function which lets you teleport to someone in the same area as you if teleporting in that area is enabled, which is really important to the game's fundamentals in realms and dungeons. It just makes getting to places so much easier. Speaking of realms, Realms appear in the Nexus and have a variety of names like Gargoyle, Beholder, Medusa, and Mummy. They can hold up to 85 players at once, but you can jump into a queue to join while hanging around the portal. There are 13 maps that the game uses to determine how a realm looks and feels, which are referred to as worlds. These worlds have a varied amount of terrain, obstacles, and sections of them are made up of the shoreline, lowlands, midlands, highlands, and mountains, better known as the Godlands. Each area has its own enemies and difficulty, which works to level you up to max level. I never really explained what happens when you hit max level though. This is where maxing out your stats can begin. You'll notice that every now and again when you kill a god in the Godlands, they'll drop a blue bag. In this bag, you'll find a potion that increases a stat by 1, with each potion color correlating to a stat. And like I said before, each class has a unique stat pool that gets maxed out, so by killing gods in the Godlands, you can upgrade 6 out of your 8 stats. But it'll be a slow and RNG filled process since drops aren't too common from these gods. So that's where dungeons come in. This is the juiciest part of the game. This is where you make it or break it. Dungeons are dropped by certain enemies and their difficulty is numbered from 0 gravestones to 10, with 0 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest. Dungeons can also drop with positive and negative modifiers which make them easier or harder while sometimes boasting more rewards. In the low-leveled areas like the shoreline and lowlands, dungeons are piss easy and don't offer much of a challenge even with low-tiered gear. So you have things like the pirate cave and forest maze that you can absolutely plow through. The same can be said for the mid and highland dungeons like the ancient ruins and the snake pit, but in the Godlands, that's where things begin to amp up. The gods found here have a chance of dropping dungeons that hold bosses. Beating the boss in these will land you 1 or more stat potions, and this is how you level up your stats slowly but efficiently. Out of all of these, I really like the Haunted Cemetery dropped by the Headless Horseman and the Parasite Chambers dropped by the Scout Colony. The Haunted Cemetery has 5 stages to it, with each stage consisting of 5 waves of enemies to defeat, with the 5th wave being a boss. It's a great way to earn stat potions, especially speed potions. I really like the variety of enemies that each area of the cemetery has too, and it's been updated with new enemies since its release. But overall, it's a pretty relaxing and casual dungeon. And I have so many memories of running this dungeon while listening to Skrillex and Monster Cat when it first came out. What a time that was. Now the Parasite Chambers, what a doozy. I originally started doing this dungeon to get items for the Sorcerer ST set, but the drop for that is complete ass, so now I run them for fun. It's one of the more unique dungeons you can find in the Godlands and can even be found in the Highlands. You go through the chambers clearing out enemies, but some enemies are immune to damage. To get around this, you'll need to find and knock explosive barrels into these enemies to remove their invulnerability. This goes for the boss of the dungeon, the Nightmare Colony, which is actually how you start the fight and do consistent damage to it. But what's funny is that these barrels can also break you and your teammates' armor, reducing it to 0. This is where fight or flight kicks in. Attack the boss and keep up your DPS for a chance at better rewards, or run away for a bit to wait for the armor break to go away. It's a good risk and reward system. This dungeon is also a great source of mana potions used to upgrade your mana points by 5 for each potion used. Many of the game's dungeons have secret rooms too, which usually hold a not so difficult to beat boss which will drop extra loot for players to find. And this incentivizes players to further explore and clear the dungeons. But there are even more dungeons, and these are dropped by event bosses, with a lot of these holding the best gear and stat potions. We're talking high-tiered weapons, armors, and abilities, the best UT gear, mana potions, life potions which increase your HP until maxed, big stat potions that give more points towards a stat, and other assorted items. These event bosses spawn once a quest or other event is completed, so they're kind of similar to how traditional MMOs spawn overworld events. Once you've completed as many events as possible and have defeated all of the quest monsters with your fellow players, it happens. Oryx closes the realm and in 2 minutes he'll teleport all of the players in the realm overworld to his castle. Players will have to storm the castle, breaking through walls and defeating enemies along the way. They'll come across the Stone Guardians which drop sweet loot and need to be defeated to get into Oryx's chamber. Players can also destroy every single suit of armor in the castle halls, which will unlock a room above the Guardians holding Janus, the Door Warden. Once he's defeated, Janus will turn into a Court of Oryx portal which holds late game dungeons that are only accessible here. Your boy Craig, intern of the Mad God, will open the portals for you, but if you decide to steer clear of that, you can enter Oryx's chamber, which is where you'll find Oryx, the Mad God. His attacks do a lot of damage, he summons his minions during the fight, and has phases throughout the fight. His fight sucks. Look, I won't lie to you, I have no idea who these goobers are and what the phases are because every time I've been in this fight, I've just stuck to the group and Oryx has died so quickly that I've never really felt any danger around him. For the first of 3 final bosses in the game, it's a bit strange. This boss and some others have had this issue since being released, but the issue disappears when there are less players fighting him, which makes sense. On death, he drops a locked wine cellar portal which can be unlocked with a wine cellar incantation that can be looted from Oryx and other bosses. Once unlocked, the players will have to run the gauntlet in the cellar and fight Oryx, the Mad God 2. Very creative name, and once again, he does a lot of damage, summons minions, and has the same issues Oryx has. Beat him, loot up, and then get ready for Oryx the Mad God 3, his final incarnation found in Oryx's Sanctuary, which is dropped by Oryx 2. It can only be unlocked if players slot in 3 of Oryx's runes into 3 monuments in the cellar. Once that happens, the Sanctuary is revealed and players can enter. This place is known as the most challenging endgame content there is, and holds some of the best gear in the game. Players enter 1 of 4 Sanctuary wings that hold their own themed enemies and boss to slay. Once that's done, Oryx the Mad God 3 will be waiting for you in the central chamber. I've never been able to get to him, but I know he does so much damn damage and is a tough as nails fight, but if you endure and use all of your skills and teamwork with other players, you'll beat him, the final boss of the game, and reap the rewards. And then you can do it all over and over again until your heart's content. That's great and all, but it highlights a massive issue with the game. Why do the low and mid tier dungeons? What's the incentive when the higher tier ones give insanely better rewards? It just means that players will run a select few dungeons out of the plethora that are in the game if they want to be efficient with time and rewards, despite how cool and unique a lot of the dungeons are. It's not very casual friendly, and it all adds up to making the game feel like it has no soul at times, no heart, just a bunch of people acting like machines running the same dungeons over and over. So you could blame the players, but don't hate the player, hate the game. Not to mention that doing the same dungeons over and over again can get pretty repetitive. Have you ever done 40 plus sprite worlds in a row to max out a character's dex? I know I haven't. Oh boy. And unfortunately, this is where more of the game's flaws start to show regarding character deaths. Because for as fun as a gameplay loop can be, dying again and again and having to restart a character can get really old really quick. It's a problem that virtually no other MMOs have, and that's because in other MMOs, you have the chance to loot your corpse, you can be revived, or plain and simply, you can just respawn at a nearby town or checkpoint. Even roguelikes don't have this issue because runs usually last an hour or so at tops, not a whole year! And look, when it comes to the loop getting old, yeah, it's frustrating having a character for a long time and then having to restart, or purposefully killing a character to get some fame or unlock other classes, which is already a questionable system if you really think about it. But having to kill the same enemies to get to level 20, do the same high-end dungeons to get quick and easy items, or do mid-tier dungeons for a safer and slower grind, but still somehow die and then have to do it again is a real pain. Sure, you can chalk that up to a skill issue, but sometimes, lag or an unforeseeable shotgun blast of bullets can end your run and that's that. It's incredibly frustrating, and the gameplay loop sits in this weird spot of being picky and choosy with what it takes from a traditional MMO's loop and a roguelike's. It all goes back to that design choice of wanting to break MMO rules. And there are other roguelike elements to this game, like exaltations which you can get for completing endgame dungeons after maxing out all of your character's stats. These grant you permanent stat boosts on the class you're playing as, among other things like better loot drops, XP boosts, and pet skins. but it's so hard to get to this stage unless you're a hardcore player that knows so much about the game. In a way, these challenges and dungeons the game throws at you to get better loot and rewards have to get harder. But despite all of this, you have things to do that are clearly aimed at casual players and things aimed at hardcore players. But then, what do you do once you've done everything? Unfortunately, the game needs bigger and bigger tasks to work towards, with players getting closer and closer with each death. But there has to be a way to bypass the start of the grind, or at least pass of the grind when making a new character to get to the high-end dungeons faster, right? A way to get past the more boring parts of the game. Well, this is where RotMG's biggest sin lies: microtransactions. Stuffing these down the throats of your player base is a great way to kill off the enjoyment someone has for a game. They're almost guaranteed to show up in a free online game to varying extents. For free games, this might consist of subscriptions to more premium content, expansions, utilities, and character skins. But this game takes microtransactions to a whole new level that I've never seen in any free game before. This game has no expansions to buy, no premium subscriptions, but everything else is here to purchase for a currency that can be bought with real-life money called Realm Gold. The prices for each pack vary depending on the currency you're using, and it seems like 100 Realm Gold is around $1. You can buy stuff like skins, clothes and dyes which change your character's appearance, change your name, buy backpacks which double your inventory size, boosters, vault chests, character slots, and gear for your characters in a few ways. Firstly, you can outright just pay for them, so yes, this game has some pay to get an advantage mechanics, but remember the important word: roguelike. What are we doing here? I can maybe understand buying something permanent like a character slot or vault chest since I did it for the video, but I regretted it immediately, considering you can just earn enough vouchers eventually from daily logins. But the daily logins are still a terrible reward system. Now that leads me to this question: why would anyone buy an item or piece of gear that they'll lose after death? Well, they might be tempted to if the option is there. See, I once knew someone that bought $20 Australian worth of T12 gear back when that was the best gear, and died with it 30 minutes later. He had the biggest feeling of buyer's remorse I've ever seen. For context, that's around $13 to $14 and around 4,314 drachma. So don't give in, no matter how many times you lose a character. The short-term fun new items made up of a few pixels give aren't worth it if you have to spend a bunch of moolah on it. These are tens of dollars worth of items that can be lost in an instant. But alternatively, you can just spend fame to buy some gear, which is not the best use of your fame, but it's free, I suppose. The game also does that annoyingly sneaky thing with purchasing premium currency, where each pack gives you enough gold to have leftovers you can't buy anything significant with, giving people that itch to buy more gold. It's so damn predatory, but it gets even worse. There's a battle pass because of course there is. Companies looked at Fortnite's battle pass monetization method and sought out to make it 1,000 times worse, and Deca Games are no exception to this. As of making this video, the game is on its 3rd battle pass, and man, it's just so average, and it's plagued with the same issue the other microtransactions have. You can earn items and resources that can be lost in death. And sure, there are permanent unlocks in the battle pass that are cool looking, but I can only count the amount of those on one hand. Finger. Again, it's all so predatory and for the most part will give you a short-term boost of fun, but nothing else. The battle pass grind isn't too flash hot either. Getting through the first 20 or so tiers can be fairly quick, but the XP needed from here gets ridiculous, especially near the end of the battle pass. You can speed up the process a bit by completing battle pass challenges on a seasonal character. Yes, that's right, you can play as a character that has no access to your regular vault chest, has its own, can only trade with other seasonal characters, and gets converted to a normal character when the season ends. I don't get it. Like, the one saving grace that all of these challenges have is that they're all free. The rewards they give you are free, the XP is okay for leveling up the battle pass, and they're okay to complete. But don't get me wrong, they still feel like a complete chore, but the progression feels natural. And now we have another form of monetization that used to be trendy: loot boxes. You can roll the dice to get gear from a select pool of gear, usually corresponding to an ST gear set. These are just massive money sinkers put into the game to coax players into trying to get the ST piece of gear they've been trying to grind for because the odds of the gear dropping is usually pretty low. It really sucks that some of the most gameplay changing gear is so hard to grind for, but really easy to throw money at the chance of getting. So for the sake of the video and for tax purposes, I bought Realm Gold and bought 10 loot boxes, and this is how it went. Oh boy. Uh-oh. This ain't looking too good. This is not looking too good at all. Oh my god. Oh my god. There's no way people spend money on this. No way. Holy shit. If I ever, and I mean ever, catch any of you buying these completely terrible loot boxes, I will lose it. Look at what I got. Mystery ST chests and shards used to get random ST items. None of it was what I wanted. I had never felt so much buyer's remorse in my life. I was in so much pain. I've broken my balls before, and not even that pain could amount to what I felt opening those damned loot boxes. And I mean, how much money would you need to spend to get a whole set of gear? Because I spent around $27 and got nothing. So the thought of what you need to spend is just depressing. Speaking of spending money, skins. For the most part, they're around the same price as 10 loot boxes. Why? Most character skins are 8x8 pixels, with some being 16x16. Oh, it's just not worth it. And those ST gear sets give your character a 16x16 skin when all pieces are equipped that looked epic, but are not worth a single dollar. None of it is. I know that companies need to make money from their free-to-play games, but this ain't it. Alright, so I bet you're wondering, is there anything more to the game? Well, the game has a soundtrack. It's pretty generic for the most part, but kinda goofy. Here, take a listen to some of them. But one of them excels over them all, the track the game looped over and over again for many years. It's so nostalgic and fills me with this bittersweet feeling remembering what the game used to be like versus what it's become. RotMG main theme. I love you. Take me back to the good old days where things were much simpler and not extremely monetized. Other than that, there's also some gameplay and secret things you'll uncover while playing. For example, there's a camera rotate feature that orientates your character, which I never use but a lot of better players do. This eye can explain a whole bunch of lore to you if you type certain prompts into the chat, which is pretty cool, but none of this lore stuff seems to matter. Don't get me wrong, it fleshes out a lot of details and can pretty much be read up on the RotMG wiki, realmi.com/wiki, but I feel like most of it counts to nothing. All of the cool stuff happened before we got here, and we don't affect the world around us. We're all just stuck in this endless limbo of beating Oryx and his minions over and over again without the formula changing. So where does all of this leave us? Well, it leaves us with a small, fun, and unique gem of an MMO that you can get yourself lost in for hours on end. However, the fun that can be had gets overshadowed by a monotonous grind personified by the game's monetary schemes and an overall lack of care from the game's publisher, Deca Games. I genuinely do hope things get better for the game because it's plagued with so many issues, which is sad because this game has had so much history since 2010. Because when it shines bright. Despite all of this, I still recommend giving the game a try. I feel like it's one of those MMOs you just need to experience. Or, have you already experienced this game before? Have you played Realm of the Mad God? Let me know in the comment section below and let me know how you feel about the game. I'd like to give a very special thanks to my patrons listed here. You guys are awesome. But that's been me. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed my content, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. And I'll catch ya in the next one.